The Burgess family has a long-standing rule. Heirs must not marry women from humble backgrounds. Yet the young Master Cecil fell hopelessly in love with Barbara, a mere fishmonger's daughter. To be with her, he renounced his inheritance, endured 99 lashes of family punishment, and knelt in the ancestral hall for 3 days and nights. His blood soaked through his shirt, yet he still smiled at her and said, "Barbara, don't be afraid. You're all I want." Later, the Burgess family finally relented, allowing him to elope with her, on the condition that he leave behind an heir for the family. Since then, Cecil has said to Barbara most often, "Wait." The first time, he told her to wait, until he got another woman pregnant. So he slept with Amanda until she conceived his child. The second time, he told her to wait again, because that pregnancy was a daughter. The Burgess family wanted a son, so he slept with Amanda again until she became pregnant once more. Just when she thought it was finally over, Cecil and Amanda's daughter, who had just celebrated her 100-day banquet, suddenly developed a high fever and vomited blood. Everyone was convinced it was Barbara's doing. Amanda lunged at her like a madwoman, clawing at her face with her nails, screaming in agony, "If you hate someone, hate me. Why harm my child?" Cecil's parents were furious. "This is our first grandchild. How dare you lay a hand on her?" When she was stripped naked and thrown into the freezer at -20 degrees, Cecil stood right outside the door. Through the frosted glass, she saw his hand tremble as he lit a cigarette. But those eyes once brimming with love now held nothing but bone-chilling coldness. "I told you to wait a little longer." He crushed the cigarette butt, his eyes filled with disappointment. "Why did you touch my child?" What a fine way to say, "his child." Barbara doubled over in pain, her heart feeling as if it had been brutally torn open. Suddenly, she remembered. He had once knelt in the rain and vowed, "Barbara, in this lifetime, I want only you." He had once pressed his forehead against hers and said, "Barbara, I will only acknowledge children born from your womb." He once kissed her fingertips after intimacy and promised, "Barbara, just wait a little longer. Soon, it'll be just the two of us." But now, he stood beside Amanda, holding their child in his arms, looking at her as if she were a malicious stranger. When the freezer door opened again, Barbara's frozen fingers dug desperately into her palms. This time, she wouldn't wait. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. Barbara dialed the Burgess family's old mansion phone. "I'm willing to leave Cecil." Her voice was eerily calm. "But I have one condition. You must send me somewhere he can never find me." On the other end of the line, Mrs. Burgess let out a satisfied laugh. "If only you'd been this sensible earlier. A stint in the cold storage seems to have taught you some manners. A fishmonger's daughter, daring to step into our Burgess family's home. In 2 weeks, we'll have everything arranged." Mr. Burgess said with disdain. "By then, you must never appear before Cecil again." The call ended. Barbara stood at the villa's entrance, her fingertips trembling. In the living room, Cecil was cradling their daughter, playing with her. Amanda leaned against his shoulder, smiling tenderly. A family of 3, blissfully happy. Barbara stood there, feeling as if her heart had been brutally carved out. "Miss Barbara is back." Amanda noticed her first and immediately straightened up nervously. Cecil reflexively handed the child to the maid. "Take her upstairs." His guarded gaze pierced Barbara's heart like a knife. He feared she might harm his child. The man who once said, "I only recognize the child born from your womb," now guards against her as if she were a murderer. Only after the child was taken away, Cecil approached, reaching out to check her body. "You're back. Were you hurt in the freezer?" Barbara looked at the man who had once shielded her from 99 lashes, her heart aching even more, and turned her head to avoid his touch. He frowned and explained, "Barbara, in a situation like last night, the more I protected you, the harsher their punishment would be, and we're about to leave soon. I don't want any complications. Besides, the child is innocent. Why would you?" "I told you it wasn't me." Barbara suddenly had reddened eyes. Cecil seemed startled by her intense reaction, pausing for a moment before softening his tone. All right. It doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter anymore." These 3 words pierced her heart like an ice pick. He still didn't believe her. As the atmosphere grew tense, Amanda walked over while rubbing her belly, feigning sincerity. "Miss Barbara, I also want to apologize to you. I was too anxious at the time. Without children of your own, you might not understand a mother's feelings." She raised her hand to smooth her hair, the jade bracelet on her wrist glowing softly under the light. Barbara, her pupils constricted sharply as she grabbed the other's wrist. Where did you get this bracelet? Amanda liked it, so I gave it to her. Cecil pulled her hand away. Consider it your apology to her. This was my mother's keepsake. Barbara's voice trembled. How could you give it away? You know exactly how important it is to me. She reached out to snatch the bracelet back, but Amanda suddenly staggered backward, clutching her stomach in pain. Ah, my stomach. Barbara. Cecil immediately pushed her away, his eyes chillingly cold. She's carrying my child. Haven't you caused enough trouble? His force was too strong. Barbara was violently thrown against the corner of the coffee table, the back of her head hitting it hard, blood instantly gushing out. But Cecil didn't even look back, picking up Amanda and rushing out. Cecil. Amanda leaned against his chest, weeping weakly. Will the baby be all right? Don't be afraid. I'm here. His voice was tender to the point of being piercing. You'll be fine. And so will the baby. Cecil carried Amanda as he rushed out of the villa. Barbara still sat collapsed on the ground, blood from the back of her head trickling down her neck. She watched his retreating figure, so urgent, so frantic, without even a single glance back. Her head was splitting with pain when she suddenly remembered how he used to be just as concerned about her in the past. Back then, she was still selling fish at the seafood market, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, free of makeup, exuding a pure and unadorned beauty. Cecil, the first time he saw her, stood in front of her stall for a full 2 hours before finally pulling out a black card and saying, "Come with me, and you'll never have to touch these things again in your life." Though poor, she was proud and unyielding. After a moment of stunned silence, she handed the card back to him directly. No need, sir. I earn my living through honest work. There's no shame in that. He gazed at her quietly for a long time before handing her another business card, his fingers slender and clean. My name is Cecil, and I'll be back tomorrow. She didn't take it seriously. Yet the next day, he indeed returned, standing in the foul-smelling market in a tailored suit, driving a black Maybach, utterly out of place. For those 3 months, to win her over, the most aloof young master did many outrageous things. She refused his roses, so he had expensive imported seafood delivered to her stall every day. She avoided his luxury car, so he walked through the fish-smelling market on foot. She said they were from different worlds, so he crouched by her fish scale-covered tub and helped her scale fish with his own hands. He stood in her fish market for 3 whole months. Each time she rejected him, he came back. The second time, the third time, the fourth time, she wasn't without feelings, but she was all too aware of the gap between them, so she couldn't, and didn't dare, let her heart be moved. It wasn't until later, when he shielded her from sulfuric acid thrown by a rival business, leaving a hideous scar on his back, that she finally relented and agreed to be with him. At that moment, despite the pain that had him drenched in cold sweat, he still managed to smile and say to her, "Barbara, remember, you owe me your life. You'll have to repay me with a lifetime." Tears fell from her eyes, scalding as they landed in his palm. After getting together, he spoiled her even more outrageously. When she cut her finger while slicing fish, he summoned a private doctor overnight. She casually mentioned liking a certain cake, and he immediately bought the entire dessert shop. When she had menstrual cramps, he stayed up all night massaging her belly. Once she fell and scraped her knee a little, and his eyes turned red with heartache. As he carried her to the hospital, his hands wouldn't stop trembling. The doctor, both amused and exasperated, said it was just a superficial wound, but he insisted on a CT scan, terrified she might have injured a bone. And now, Barbara looked down at the pool of blood on the ground and suddenly smiled, laughing until tears came streaming down. She took a taxi to the hospital alone. After the wound was treated, she was still so dizzy she could barely stand. Just as she stepped out of the examination room, someone suddenly grabbed her wrist with a fierce grip. "Barbara." Cecil's voice was laced with anger. "Amanda almost had a miscarriage, and you still won't let it go. You followed her to the hospital to cause trouble." She turned back and saw his furrowed brows and the coldness in his eyes. Dressed in a tailored suit, he was as aloof and noble as ever, except for the lingering scent of Amanda's perfume on him. "I came to the hospital." Her voice was so soft it was almost inaudible. "Not to see her." Slowly raising her hand, she pointed to her bandaged forehead. "I'm injured too." Cecil froze for a moment, only then noticing her pale complexion and the bandage on her temple. "You said once she gave birth, you'd take me away." Barbara looked at him with reddened eyes. "But now, do you even see me anymore?" Cecil frowned even deeper, reaching out to touch her wound. What happened? You pushed me, she said calmly. I hit the corner of the table. Cecil's pupils contracted sharply, as if only now recalling the scene at that time. His anger dissipated significantly as he pulled her into his embrace. Barbara, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just worried about Amanda's safety. She's still carrying a child. If anything were to happen, our departure would be delayed again. Barbara let him hold her, her gaze empty. She had heard these words far too many times. I understand. She pushed him away. Go take care of her. She turned to leave, but he grabbed her wrist again. Barbara, no matter what, you must believe that you're the only one I love. Everything I do is just so we can leave here as soon as possible. He gently touched her bandage. I'll have the maid look after you. Don't let the wound get wet. With that, he let go and turned to walk toward Amanda's hospital room. Barbara stood in place, watching his tall figure gradually fade into the distance. She suddenly laughed, laughing until tears streamed down her face. I don't believe it anymore, she whispered. Cecil, I don't believe any of it anymore. In the following days, Barbara received provocative photos from Amanda almost every day. In the photos, Cecil was bending down to comfort their daughter with gentle eyes, while Amanda leaned on his shoulder, smiling sweetly. Her fingers trembled as she swiped through them one by one. There were pictures of him staying by Amanda's hospital bed late at night, feeding her soup with his own hands, and holding their child with adoration in his eyes. Each glance felt like a knife stabbing her heart, but as the pain persisted, she suddenly realized she could no longer feel it. Perhaps her heart had already died the moment she was locked in the cold storage. Just as she was about to block Amanda, her phone vibrated again. It's a photo. Her jade bracelet was Amanda holding and playing with in her hand. Want your mother's keepsake? Come and get it if you do. Barbara suddenly stood up, her vision momentarily darkening, but she couldn't care less as she grabbed her coat and rushed out. In the VIP ward, Amanda was cradling the child and humming softly. Daddy loves baby the most, doesn't he? Daddy comes to see us every day. She looked up and saw Barbara, her smile deepening. You're here. You know what? During my days in the hospital, Cecil didn't even go to the company, just stayed here taking care of me and our daughter. Barbara dug her nails deep into her palms, unwilling to listen. Where is it? Amanda leisurely picked up the jade bracelet from the bedside and waved it. You mean this? She curled her lips into a cruel smile. How about this? You kowtow to me 3 times, and I'll give it back to you. Barbara trembled all over. Don't push me too far. So what if I push you too far? Amanda said with disdain in her eyes. Barbara, you're just a lowly fishmonger, while I am the heiress of the Clarence family conglomerate, the designated marriage partner of the Burgess family. What status do you have to stand beside me? Making you kowtow to me is an honor for you. She made a gesture as if to let go. I'll count to 3. If you don't kowtow, I'll drop it. 1, 2. Barbara bit her lip hard. Her eyes reddened, her knees hitting the ground with a heavy thud. 3 loud kowtows left her vision blurred. Amanda laughed out loud. You look so pitiful when you kowtow. She stood up, looking down at Barbara. But I won't give it to you. With that, she raised her hand. Snap! The jade bracelet fell to the ground, shattering into several pieces. Barbara trembled all over and had just rushed to pick it up when the door was suddenly flung open. Cecil and Mr. Burgess Mrs. Burgess stood at the doorway, their faces dark. What are you doing, Mr. Burgess demanded sternly. Amanda instantly changed her expression, crying as she threw herself into Cecil's arms. Cecil, I don't know what happened. She suddenly rushed in and started pinching and hitting the child. She pulled open the child's clothes, revealing several dark purple pinch marks. Barbara was incredulous. I didn't do it. She shook her head in panic, only to see Mr. Burgess striding toward her. Snap! The slap left her vision darkening, ears ringing, and blood seeping from the corner of her mouth. Vicious woman. Mr. Burgess's voice seemed to come from far away. How could you lay hands on such a young child? Mrs. Burgess spoke coldly. The last punishment was still too lenient. Someone, drag her out and give her 20 lashes. Cecil suddenly clenched his fist and took a step forward. Mom, you still want to protect her. Mrs. Burgess sharply interrupted. She harmed your own daughter. Even if you plan to abandon her at the old house and run away with Barbara, that doesn't change the fact that she will always be your flesh and blood. Barbara trembled all over and instinctively looked at Cecil. He still stood there, his slender fingers clenched so tightly they turned white. the knuckles turning blue. He looked at her, his gaze so conflicted, so pained. Yet in the end, it gradually settled into calm. He slowly turned his face away. Barbara stared blankly at his averted face, her heart feeling as if it had been brutally torn apart. Yet the next moment, the corners of her lips slowly lifted as she let out a laugh. She laughed at herself for being so foolish, actually believing he would take her away. Laughed at herself for being so stupid, thinking those vows could outweigh blood ties. Laughed at herself for being so naive, still hoping he would choose her at the last moment. Barbara was dragged to the hospital's open-air corridor, where bodyguards pressed her shoulders, forcing her to kneel on the ground. The first lash struck, the pain so intense her vision went black. And in that day she remembered, on the day the Burgess family did everything to keep them apart. She tearfully broke up with him. That night, a storm raged as he stood outside her home until dawn. The next day, his fever nearly turned into pneumonia. When she visited him, delirious with fever, he still clutched her hand and whispered, "Barbara, remember, even if the whole world opposes us, I want only you." The second lash fell. She bit through her lip, the taste of blood flooding her mouth, remembering how he flew back overnight from abroad just because she sent a "I miss you" message in the middle of the night. The third lash, the fourth lash, each lash felt like it was striking her heart, hurting more than the wounds on her back. By the 15th lash, she could still faintly hear his pained voice. "How did you get hurt again? Let me see." By the 19th lash, Barbara was already in such agony that her consciousness blurred, her ears ringing. She faintly heard someone calling her name, but she could no longer distinguish reality from hallucination. With the final lash, she could endure no more. Her vision darkened as she completely passed out. When she awoke again, Barbara lay face down on a hospital bed, her back burning with pain. "Barbara." Cecil immediately leaned in, his eyes bloodshot. "You're awake. Does it still hurt?" She looked at his anxious expression and suddenly felt dazed. In the past, when she had a fever, he would stay by her bedside like this, never leaving her side. But now, she wasn't suffering from a fever. She had been whipped by her parents, and he, from start to finish, had stood by indifferently. She silently withdrew her hand, unwilling to look at him. Cecil stiffened slightly and spoke again to explain. "Barbara, it's not that I didn't want to speak up for you, but if I had intervened then, they would only have punished you more severely." "So," Barbara said hoarsely, "you also think I hurt that child?" Cecil S. Adams' apple bobbed, and in the end, he chose silence. This moment of silence was like a blunt knife, ruthlessly cutting open Barbara's chest. With reddened eyes, she looked at him, tears trembling on the verge of falling. "I just want to ask you one thing. Do you believe me or not?" "Barbara." He frowned slightly, his voice tense, carrying a hint of anger even he hadn't noticed. "With all the witnesses and evidence, how can you expect me to believe you? Haven't I told you? Just wait until this period passes. Why must you stir up trouble?" Barbara's tears suddenly fell. She thought she wouldn't feel the pain anymore, but her heart still ached as if it were being torn apart. She hurriedly turned her head, not wanting him to see her in such a disheveled state. "Go away." Her voice was so soft it was almost inaudible. "Wait a little longer, okay?" His voice softened. "Soon, we can go back to how things were before." "Back to before." Barbara closed her eyes, her throat tightening. "Can we really go back? He now has Amanda and 2 children. For their sake." He heard her time and again, choosing others over her repeatedly. She slowly turned her back to him, not wanting to say a word. Cecil gently stroked her hair. "Sleep. I'll stay here with you." Before she could finish speaking, the nurse hurriedly pushed the door open. "Mr. Cecil, Miss Amanda has been crying non-stop, insisting she must see you." Cecil frowned, hesitated for a moment, then stood up. "Barbara, I'll be right back." But once he left, he never returned. On the day of discharge, it was pouring rain. Barbara stood at the hospital entrance, watching Cecil's car slowly approach. As soon as she opened the car door, she saw Amanda holding a child in the passenger seat. "Cecil." Amanda shrank closer to Cecil upon seeing her. I haven't recovered from the last scare." Her eyes reddened, her voice trembling. "She can hurt me, but not the child. Could you? Give me a little more time. Don't make me ride in the same car with her." Barbara stood in the rain, shivering all over. Cecil remained silent for a long time before finally handing her an umbrella. "Barbara, wait here for a while. The car will come to pick you up soon." With that, he rolled up the car window, and the black sedan sped away. Barbara stood rooted to the spot, watching helplessly as the car carrying the family of 3 drove further and further away, eventually disappearing into the curtain of rain. She closed her eyes, her chest feeling as if a gaping hole had been torn open, with cold wind howling through it. Impossible to fill. She waited for a long time, until the rain grew heavier and heavier, and the sky nearly darkened. Cecil's promised car never arrived. She dialed Cecil's number over and over, but all she ever heard was the cold, relentless busy tone. The sky grew darker by the minute, and the rain poured down relentlessly. With no other choice, she opened her umbrella and trudged step by step toward home. The fierce wind nearly snapped the umbrella's ribs, and she staggered unsteadily before suddenly slipping and falling hard into a puddle. With a sharp crack, the umbrella split apart, and the rain instantly drenched her from head to toe. By the time she finally made it home in a sorry state, it was already late at night. Drenched from head to toe, she stood in the entryway when she heard Amanda's tearful voice coming from the living room. "Cecil, I know you're into Barbara." Her voice was soft and trembling. "But this is really a special situation. I have a clogged duct. The pain is unbearable, and the baby keeps crying to nurse." She sobbed. "Just think of the baby. Please help me. Don't worry. Barbara won't find out." Barbara froze in place, her blood seeming to turn to ice. Cecil stood with his back to the door. Barbara couldn't see his expression, only the tension in his rigid posture. After a long silence, she saw Cecil's left hand slowly rise, his fingertips parting Amanda's collar as his right hand caressed the snow-white skin beneath. Finally, she watched helplessly as he lowered his head, his thin lips pressing against that softness. Barbara stood rooted to the spot, as if struck by lightning. She watched helplessly as Cecil leaned down, as his lips touched Amanda's chest, as he began to suckle rhythmically. Time seemed to stretch, each second cutting into her heart like a knife, until Amanda let out a soft moan, her fingers threading through his hair. "Ah, here too." Cecil frowned slightly. "Isn't this side already clear?" Amanda said nothing, simply wrapping her arms around his neck and pulling his face toward her. Cecil remained silent for a moment before lowering his head again. Barbara couldn't bear to watch any longer and turned to rush out. The downpour drenched her, yet she felt no cold. Her mind was filled with memories of their first night, Cecil holding her like a treasure in his arms, his voice hoarse as he whispered, "Barbara, you're my first woman, and my last." Now, his lips were touching another woman. "It hurts." She bent over in pain, unable to stand steady, feeling as if her entire heart was being torn apart. "Cecil, you didn't keep a single promise you made to me. If that's the case, why did you barge into my world and disrupt my life in the first place?" Barbara hugged her knees, squatting in the rain until her legs went numb, only stumbling back when the lights in the villa went out one by one. In the middle of the night, a high fever struck her suddenly and fiercely. In her daze, she heard Cecil's gentle voice from next door. "Be good, baby. Daddy will tell you a story." Right. He was giving prenatal education to the baby in Amanda's womb, just as he had promised her back then. "When we have a child, I'll tell them stories every day." She had no idea how much time had passed when she felt someone calling her. "Barbara, Barbara." Barbara struggled to open her eyes and saw Cecil sitting by the bed holding a medicine bowl. "How did it get this bad?" He tenderly touched her forehead, his movements as gentle as they used to be. But the moment he got close, Barbara saw the scene from the living room flash before her eyes again. She trembled and closed her eyes, not wanting to look at him. "Barbara, I've left the medicine and water here." He paused. "Amanda is pregnant, and there's another child at home to take care of. You shouldn't come out these days to avoid infecting them. I'll lock the door, and the maid will bring you meals." With that, without waiting for her reply, he turned and left quickly, going back to attend to Amanda and their child. The moment the lock clicked shut, Barbara suddenly burst into laughter. The laughter grew louder and louder, eventually turning into heart-wrenching sobs. How ridiculous. She was once the treasure he held in his hands, but now she has become a dangerous object that needs to be locked away. Perhaps due to Amanda's instructions, no one has brought Barbara food or water these past few days. Her fever persisted, leaving her dazed and bedridden, yet the sounds of laughter and joy from outside kept reaching her ears. Cecil and Amanda were watching a movie, the same one he had watched with her countless times before. They were having a candlelit dinner, a surprise he used to prepare for her by cooking himself every month. They even began discussing names for their future children, just like he once held her close and whispered tenderly in her ear. Barbara curled up on the bed, biting the corner of the quilt hard to keep herself from crying out. After burning with fever for 3 full days, she finally broke the fever. Meanwhile, Barbara was also released. This day happened to be Amanda's daughter's first birthday celebration. The banquet hall was resplendent and filled with guests. Mr. Burgess, Mrs. Burgess beamed with joy as they held their granddaughter, surrounded by a mountain of luxurious gifts. Cecil, this is for Amanda. Mrs. Burgess smiled and handed over an embroidered box containing a diamond ring the size of a pigeon's egg. We're so grateful to her for giving the Burgess family such an adorable granddaughter. Cecil took the ring and gently placed it on Amanda's hand, saying softly, "You've worked hard." Amanda blushed and nestled into his arms. The picture of a happy family of 3. Barbara stood in the corner, watching the family take a group photo in front of the picture wall, listening to the guests' compliments one after another. This child is so beautiful, just like her father. The eyes are like Amanda's, so bright and lively. What a perfect match. Even their child is so adorable. Her nails dug deep into her palms, yet she felt no pain. Miss Barbara. Amanda suddenly approached her with a sweet smile. Let's take a photo together. Barbara shook her head. No need. Don't be shy. Amanda grabbed her hand without waiting for a response, forcibly pulling her in front of the camera, then lowered her voice provocatively. See, Cecil treats me so well now. He stays with me every night, tells stories to the child, and tucks me in. Barbara closed her eyes wearily, unwilling to listen or argue. Click. The moment the shutter was pressed, the photo wall behind her suddenly collapsed with a thunderous crash. Watch out. Cecil suddenly rushed over and yanked Barbara aside. A massive picture frame grazed the edge of her clothes and crashed to the ground, while Amanda was pinned beneath it, a pool of glaring crimson spreading beneath her. Amanda. Cecil released Barbara and dashed over like a madman. Outside the operating room, Cecil smoked one cigarette after another. Barbara watched his anxious demeanor and remembered how he had stayed outside the operating room all night when she had acute appendicitis. Mr. Cecil. The patient is hemorrhaging. The doctor suddenly rushed out. The blood bank is running low. We need on-site blood donations. Take mine. Cecil immediately rolled up his sleeve. No, you're type AB, and the patient is type O. Hearing this, Cecil suddenly looked at Barbara. At that moment, she felt as if struck by lightning. She took a step back abruptly, her voice trembling as she said, I won't donate. Barbara. Cecil grabbed her wrist sharply, his gaze piercing. This isn't the time for your temper. She's carrying a child. If anything happens, we won't be able to leave. Do you understand? Barbara's heart ached fiercely. Was he afraid they couldn't leave? Or was he afraid something would happen to their child? What if I refuse? She asked softly. Cecil's face darkened instantly. I saved you, which is why Amanda got hurt. You're the one who benefited. Is donating some blood really that hard? He looked at her with disappointment. Barbara. How could you become like this? Barbara's eyes were red. Had she changed? It was clearly him who wouldn't let go back then, saying she was the only one for him. It was him who promised to have only her in this lifetime. It was him who stood in the rain begging her to trust him. Now, he's saying she's the one who changed. So, her voice trembled. You regret saving me back then, don't you? If given another chance, you'd go save Amanda first, right? Cecil froze. What nonsense are you talking about? The patient's condition is critical, the doctor urged anxiously. Any delay will risk both the mother and the child. Cecil hardened his gaze and directly ordered the bodyguard. Take her to the blood donation room. Barbara was still struggling as she was forcibly pressed onto the blood donation chair. But when she saw Cecil anxiously staring toward the operating room, refusing to spare her even a glance, she suddenly gave up resisting. The pain of the needle piercing her vein was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. Blood slowly drained from her body. Yet Cecil never once turned to look at her. When 400 cubic centimeters had been drawn, the nurse hesitated. This young lady is too weak. Continue. Cecil didn't even turn his head. When 600 cubic centimeters had been drawn, Barbara started seeing black spots before her eyes. In her daze, she seemed to see Cecil as she first met him, standing by the fish stall smiling at her. My name is Cecil. I'll come again tomorrow. At the last moment, she completely lost consciousness. Barbara, when she woke up again, the first thing she saw was Cecil sitting by the hospital bed. She thought he would coax her with humility as before, begging for her forgiveness. But when she opened her eyes, she was met with his piercingly cold gaze. Did you tamper with the photo wall? He got straight to the point, his voice as cold as ice. Barbara felt her mind go blank. What do you mean? Mom and Dad checked. That wall was tampered with. Cecil glared sharply. If it wasn't you, who would go to such lengths to harm Amanda? Barbara shivered all over, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. I'll say it again. It wasn't me. Not this time. Not last time. Not the time before that. Do you believe me? You always ask me to believe you. Cecil grew colder. But what have you actually done? Time and again. You've framed Amanda and hurt the child. How many times have I told you? I'm only nice to her for the child's sake. Why must you keep causing trouble? What good does it do us if she loses the baby? Barbara, her chest heaved violently, countless grievances and fury choking in her throat. She wanted to question, to refute, to scream at him with all her might that she had never hurt anyone. She wanted to ask him if he had forgotten once saying he would trust only her. Had he forgotten his promise never to doubt her? But in the end, she just looked at him wearily, her voice trembling as she said word by word, "Fine. Since you don't believe me, let's end it. I'll step aside for you. Your family of 4 can live happily ever after." Cecil froze abruptly, his pupils contracting sharply. What did you say? Was I not clear enough? Barbara retorted with reddened eyes, staring at him stubbornly. I'm willing to step aside for you. Bang! Cecil kicked over the coffee table, sending glass shards flying everywhere. He grabbed her wrist firmly, his eyes burning with anger. Barbara, what nonsense are you saying? I've always loved you. How could you want to push me toward another woman? Barbara stared back at him with reddened eyes, stubbornly silent. After a long standoff, Cecil took a deep breath, finally suppressing his anger. He pulled her into a tight embrace. Let's end this matter here. Amanda has already forgiven you, and I won't dwell on it either. But remember, he tightened his arms. Don't ever talk about leaving again. Everything I've done is for us to run away together. Barbara didn't tell him that she had already decided to leave. She forgave me just like that, she asked softly, without any conditions. Cecil stiffened, remained silent for a moment before lighting a cigarette. Through the swirling smoke, he slowly spoke. She wants to have a wedding. She said she wants the children to know their parents were once in love and got married. After a pause, he turned to look at her. But this wedding is fake. Just to give the children an explanation. Don't overthink it. Barbara trembled her lips but couldn't utter a word. It felt as if an invisible hand were gripping my heart tightly, each beat bringing a tearing pain. Cecil, Cecil, you already have a child with her. And now you're even holding a wedding. What else is fake? What is she? After all, Cecil was still speaking, his voice fading in and out. Barbara watched his moving lips and suddenly felt utterly exhausted. She slowly closed her eyes, letting those words turn into sharp blades, carving into her heart one cut at a time. From beginning to end, she never spoke again. Cecil stayed by her side at the hospital for 3 full days, caring for her with almost meticulous attention during that time. When feeding her medicine, he would always gently blow on it to cool it down before carefully bringing it to her lips. At night, the slightest movement from her would startle him awake, and he would frantically grasp her hand, not daring to close his eyes again until he was sure she was all right. When the nurse gave her an anti-inflammatory injection, he held her tightly in his arms, gently covering her eyes with his fingers, whispering soothingly, "Don't look. It'll be over soon." Yet, right after she was discharged, he immediately began preparing for the wedding, to prevent her from causing trouble. He even took away her phone and assigned bodyguards to watch her around the clock. Barbara did not resist, only numbly packed her belongings. After packing her luggage, she donated every single item he had given her over the years. These never truly belonged to her. Just like Barbara and Cecil were always from 2 different worlds. On the day of the wedding, her phone was returned to her, filled with photos sent by Amanda. Cecil gently placing a ring on Amanda's finger in his suit. They shared a passionate kiss amidst everyone's blessings. The family of 4 happily cut the cake together. Each photo felt like a knife, torturing her already shattered heart. Just as she was about to turn off her phone, the door suddenly swung open. Mr. Burgess, Mrs. Burgess stood at the doorway, their eyes cold. The paperwork is all done. You'll take a flight and leave now. Mrs. Burgess handed over a plane ticket. We guarantee that once you're gone, he'll never find you. Barbara silently took the ticket and picked up the suitcase that had been packed long ago. As she stepped out of the villa, the sunlight was just right. She didn't look back, walking step by step toward the car parked by the roadside. She didn't say goodbye to Cecil, because, for the rest of their lives, the mountains would be high and the rivers long. They would never meet again. On the day the two families held the wedding, the gathering was filled with celebrities. In the bustling and lively banquet hall, the lights were dazzling, glasses clinked, and the aroma of wine spilled from the colliding goblets, drifting through the noisy crowd. Though it was just a fake wedding, the Burgess family still made it so grand. Many who were unaware of the truth mistook it for a real wedding, sighing about how Amanda had finally, after all these years, secured her place in the Burgess family by virtue of her child. When these words reached Cecil's ears, Cecil was somewhat displeased, but there was nothing he could do about it. Initially, Cecil was vehemently opposed to holding this wedding, even if it was just a sham. After all, Cecil had only ever wanted to marry Barbara in his lifetime, and only wanted her to be his bride. But his parents were making a life-and-death fuss, forcing him to marry Amanda. Just as both sides were at a stalemate, Amanda stepped in to mediate, saying she had lived namelessly in the Burgess household for over a year for his sake, and to bear a son for the Burgess family. She became pregnant again right after giving birth. She asked for nothing, only that Cecil would hold a fake wedding with her, so their children would know in the future that their parents had once loved each other and been married. By the time she said this, Cecil's heart had already softened halfway. What made Cecil completely stop resisting the wedding was Amanda's proposal of an irresistibly tempting condition, one that Cecil couldn't refuse. Amanda said that as long as he accompanied her properly through this wedding, she would let Cecil take Barbara away. No need to wait for her to give birth to their son, nor to stay with her during her postpartum confinement. After all, they already had a child. The wedding was done, and she lacked nothing. Cecil hadn't expected Amanda to be so magnanimous, which made Cecil feel somewhat guilty. If not for the fact that Cecil had already fallen in love with Barbara, Amanda would have been an excellent wife. Originally, Cecil had no intention of contributing much to this wedding, but in the end, he invested a significant amount of resources and money. He hoped to make up for some of his guilt at the thought that after this wedding, Cecil could finally take Barbara away to live happily together. Cecil's heart couldn't help but swell with excitement. Cecil knew all too well how much Barbara had endured for their future over the past year, and how many sacrifices she had made. That's why Cecil didn't tell her about leaving right after the wedding, keeping it as a surprise for her. After they left to start their own life together, Cecil vowed to love her properly to make it up to her. Cecil had even planned out their future children's lives. Just then, the wedding coordinator knocked on Cecil's door. "Mr. Cecil, the wedding is about to begin. Please make your final preparations." Cecil acknowledged with a response, then stood before the mirror to put on his suit jacket, fastening each button meticulously up to the very top. Cecil took a deep breath, composed his expression, and proceeded toward the banquet hall. The entire wedding venue was lavishly adorned with colorful flowers. Cecil walked down the flower-adorned corridor toward the stage, continuously receiving congratulations from guests along the way. At the very front, below the stage, Cecil saw Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess smiling with satisfaction. He also saw, under the melodious piano music, the tightly closed doors slowly pushed open as Amanda, dressed in a white veil, walked arm in arm with Mr. Clarence toward Cecil. Cecil knew that at this moment, he should put on a smile to welcome his bride, but at this moment, Cecil couldn't muster a smile at all, his mind completely filled with Barbara's image. What is she doing right now? Is she watching his wedding to another woman through a live news broadcast? Or hiding in a corner silently shedding tears? Either scenario made Cecil feel suffocated with unbearable pressure. Since it was a fake wedding, many steps were skipped directly, jumping straight to the climax of exchanging rings. The solemn voice of the officiant fell into Cecil's ears, yet Cecil remained completely still. "Please, the groom may now place the ring on the bride's finger." The MC's voice rang out once more, like a giant hand of fate pulling Cecil's drifting thoughts back to reality. Cecil lowered his gaze to the diamond ring presented by the wedding attendant. It lay on a velvet cushion, refracting countless blinding rays under the crystal chandelier, each beam like an icy needle piercing deep into Cecil's eyes. Cecil reached out, his fingertips trembling slightly, just as they were about to touch the cold metal. A sudden, inexplicable heat surged from the base of his ring finger, sharp and swift, like an electric current or the lick of invisible flames. A phantom pain. The sudden pain almost made Cecil withdraw his hand, and in that instant, A distant yet clear voice rang in his ears, choked with sobs. Are you really going to marry her? Then what about me? What am I to you? The voice pierced through the dust of time, striking Cecil unexpectedly. It was long ago, when Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess first forced Cecil to break up with Barbara and marry Amanda. Although Cecil tried his best to hide it, Barbara still caught wind of it. That day, she stood before Cecil. Though she didn't cry, it hurt Cecil even more than if she had. How did Cecil respond in the end? Cecil held her tightly and vowed, I will never marry anyone but you. Cecil, every word spoken back then carried a scorching heat, seared deep into Cecil's memory. Now, in this sacred wedding venue, they have become the sharpest irony. Cecil, Cecil. A voice urging with laughter suddenly yanked Cecil back to reality. Cecil quickly snapped back to attention and looked over, only to see Amanda slightly tilting her face upward, gazing at him with a shy, timid expression. Her meticulously lined eyes brimmed with pure anticipation for the future. Countless gazes of blessings and expectations followed Amanda's eyes, converging on Cecil like a spotlight on stage, leaving Cecil with nowhere to hide. Cecil forced himself to lift his heavy arm and pick up the expensive diamond ring. It was so exquisite, so cold, pressing heavily against Cecil's fingertips. Then Cecil lifted Amanda's fair and delicate hand, her ring finger right before his eyes, its tip trembling slightly like a butterfly waiting to alight in the wind. The cold metal edge of the ring touched her warm knuckle. In that instant, the meticulously manicured, crimson-painted nail on Amanda's finger before his eyes eerily blurred and distorted, transforming into the appearance of another pair of hands. Hands whose nails were always neatly trimmed but never painted, yet were the most beautiful Cecil had ever seen. They were hers. They were Cecil's beloved Barbara's hands. Then Amanda followed suit, placing the wedding ring on Cecil's right ring finger. You may now kiss the bride. Cheers and applause erupted like a tidal wave, flooding the entire space. Amidst the roaring tide of noise, Cecil stiffened and slowly leaned down toward Amanda before him. The distance between the two grew closer. Amanda's intensely floral perfume aggressively invaded Cecil's nostrils, like an invisible film tightly enveloping Cecil. His hand hanging at his side suddenly clenched. Cecil closed his eyes and gently pressed a kiss against Amanda's soft lips. During the brief kiss, Cecil felt none of the excitement of newlyweds. Instead, his mind was filled with only one persistent image. In the dimly lit hallway, Barbara stood on her tiptoes, quickly pressing a kiss to his lips before swiftly retreating and disappearing around the corner, leaving behind only the faint blur of a white skirt. That was their first kiss. Sudden, fleeting, but it made Cecil thrilled for a long time. Even now Cecil still remembers Barbara's soft lips and the faint scent of gardenias on her when she kissed him. Congratulations to the newlyweds. May you have a harmonious union lasting 100 years. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, fireworks bloomed, filling the entire sky. The wedding had finally come to an end. The next moment, Cecil's calm eyes suddenly brightened, like a caged beast finally granted eternal freedom. Cecil paid no heed to Amanda's astonished cries, his parents' shocked screams, or the guests' bewildered murmurs. Cecil burst out of the prison that had confined him, tore off the suit jacket that shackled his movements like chains, swiftly pulled open the car door, and stomped on the accelerator, speeding away into the distance. Cecil clutched the steering wheel with veins bulging on his hands, which even began to tremble violently. He pressed his lips together, eyes fixed unwaveringly ahead, his mind consumed by a single thought. Faster, even faster. Hurry back. Then take Barbara away from here completely, to live a life with only him and her. After a sharp screech of brakes, Cecil ignored the still-moving car, swiftly flung open the door, and strode toward the villa. Barbara, we can leave now. Right this moment, Cecil exclaimed excitedly while pushing open Barbara's bedroom door. But in the next moment, Cecil's excited smile froze instantly on his face. The room remained exactly as Cecil had left it. Barbara's frequently read book still lay open on the bed, but its owner was nowhere to be seen. Barbara, Barbara. Cecil with just one breath. It was forgotten. The trembling voice echoed in the empty room, but no familiar reply came back. Cecil. The hand gripping the doorframe fell limply. Cecil suddenly turned and dashed up the stairs. The study, the lounge, the gym, even the narrow storage room. Cecil was like a wounded, trapped beast, frantically circling in the shrinking space. Every corner was scrutinized by Cecil's desperate gaze. Every possible hiding place was roughly searched by Cecil. His movements grew faster, more erratic, his breathing as heavy as a broken bellows. Panic spread like ink dripping into clear water, quickly filling his chest. Cold, viscous, and so heavy it nearly suffocated Cecil. Cecil grabbed the butler nearby. Barbara, I told you to keep a close eye on her. Where did she go? To prevent Barbara from escaping at the last moment, Cecil not only locked her room door and confiscated her phone but even assigned someone to guard her specifically. In Cecil's expectation, Barbara, an orphan, had her only source of income confiscated by Cecil, so she couldn't possibly go anywhere else, especially with heavy security in place. She can't even leave this villa. Why is she gone now? The butler was Cecil so startled by the shout that his face turned pale. Trembling and unable to utter a complete sentence, Cecil suddenly released the butler and was about to go downstairs and head outside. The next moment Mrs. Burgess walked in through the door, raising her eyes to give Cecil a cold stare. No need to keep looking. She's already gone. You'll never find her. Mrs. Burgess paused briefly, and in that fleeting moment, the air seemed to freeze abruptly. Since you've already held a wedding with Amanda, focus on taking care of her and your child from now on. Stop thinking about such irrelevant people. Left. The term is so absurd it's laughable. Impossible. Barbara would only leave with him. That was her promise to him from the very beginning. Barbara loved him so much she even lowered her standards step by step to wait for him, allowing him to have children with other women. If she really wanted to leave, she should have heartlessly walked away when he compromised with his parents and agreed to have a child with Amanda, instead of staying out of pity and waiting for him all these years. Was it you and Dad who forced her to leave? I've already agreed to have a child with Amanda as you demanded, and even married her. I've given in to everything you asked. Why did you still have to drive her away? Cecil's voice suddenly rose sharply, unleashing the anger that had been suppressed for so long. The surroundings fell into a deathly silence, so quiet that only Cecil's pounding heartbeat and rapid breathing remained. These sounds were infinitely amplified in the absolute stillness, deafening, only emphasizing the maddening emptiness of the room. In this suffocating silence, Mrs. Burgess said nothing, merely stepping forward to hand Barbara's farewell letter to Cecil. We didn't drive her away. She chose to leave on her own. As for the reason, you'll understand when you read it. Cecil paused before finally letting his gaze fall upon Mrs. Burgess's offered letter, still bearing Cecil's familiar handwriting. To Cecil. Cecil instinctively reached out a finger, carrying a faint, unexamined hope he himself refused to dwell on, and lightly touched the pristine envelope. Cold. Cecil, the chill from the fingertips felt like a sharp bolt of lightning, instantly piercing through all of Cecil's nerves and disguises. Cecil's fingers retracted and extended several times before finally taking the letter from Mrs. Burgess's hand. Rip. The edge of the envelope was slowly torn open by Cecil, the sound like a key unlocking a door to the unknown. Behind the door lay either hell or heaven. Cecil had no idea. On the pristine letter paper was Barbara's elegant and neat handwriting, as if she herself stood before Cecil, calmly explaining the reason for her departure. Cecil, by the time you read this letter, I'll already be gone. As for where I've gone, I don't even know myself. But you won't find me. The reason I'm leaving is simple. I can't wait any longer. At first, you said you'd just have a child with her and then leave. I believed you. Then after your daughter was born, you said she was too lonely and needed a brother before you could leave. I believed that too. But now you're saying you want to marry her, so your children will know their parents loved each other. I don't understand. How much longer must I wait for you to take me away? Will there come a day when you ask me to wait until your children with her grow up, get married, have their own kids, or until you grow old with her before finally coming to me? Cecil, I'm a woman too, and my youth isn't endless. I won't keep waiting for a promise that never comes due. Let's part ways here. We won't meet again. Cecil held Barbara's farewell letter and read it once more. Then again, every word Cecil recognized, yet their meaning eluded him. The paper trembled between Cecil's fingers, emitting faint rustling sounds. A sudden metallic taste surged uncontrollably in his throat. The world before him twisted violently, colors peeling away as sounds faded into silence. The solid floor beneath seemed to collapse and melt in an instant, turning into a bottomless, icy quicksand. Cecil was silently and irresistibly swallowed by this quicksand, sinking, plummeting straight into an abyss devoid of light, devoid of echoes, filled only with boundless cold. Cecil's world was completely plunged into darkness. Cecil, Call someone quickly." Overnight, the Burgess family became the new laughingstock. Yesterday, the groom left the bride behind and walked out first. Today, the groom is desperately trying to drive the bride away. Cecil's room was already in shambles, with everything that could be smashed by Cecil completely destroyed. Cecil coldly watched the furious Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess, as well as Amanda, who was holding her daughter and on the verge of fainting from crying. His grip on the knife tightened, the blade sinking deeper into his wrist. "Let me go. Let me find her, or we'll all die together." Even though Cecil had read Barbara's letter multiple times, Cecil stubbornly believed she had been driven away by his parents, or even by Amanda. Originally, Cecil had planned to go find Barbara as soon as he woke up, to elope with her and never return. However, Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess desperately blocked Cecil from leaving, even using medicine to temporarily prevent Cecil from standing up. To make Cecil stay, they even had Amanda hold their child to persuade Cecil to remain. In the past, if Barbara were still here, Cecil might have hesitated a little, but now that Barbara is gone, Cecil has no more weaknesses left. He no longer cares about anything. "You bastard, put that knife down. Are you trying to drive your mother and me to our deaths? Cecil, please, for the sake of our child, stay with us, won't you?" Everyone before him was pressuring Cecil, forcing Cecil to stay, to raise a child born out of duty with someone he didn't love, to endure a marriage he despised. No one considered Cecil's feelings. No one thought about Barbara's feelings. "You've already driven me to death once before. I never wanted to sleep with her. It was you who drugged me. And now, this is all you're doing. And this child wasn't what I wanted." When Cecil truly refused to touch Amanda, even feeling disgusted to be in the same room with her, his parents, desperate for a grandson, conspired with Amanda to drug Cecil. When Cecil woke up, the first thing he did was try to strangle Amanda. But Cecil's parents and Amanda pleaded with him in tears, saying they were old and just wanted a grandson. They said Cecil couldn't be so selfish, only thinking of taking Barbara away and leaving them with nothing. Later, Amanda also knelt down and begged Cecil, saying she had loved Cecil for a long time, asking for no status, and willing to bear Cecil's child. As long as the child was born, she would help Cecil and Barbara leave. In the end, Cecil's parents threatened Cecil with their own lives and even Barbara's life. Cecil was completely cornered, leaving him no choice but to compromise. But their greed grew increasingly insatiable, claiming that a single daughter would be too lonely to wield power in the future, demanding Cecil to have another son. Step by step, they forced Cecil to compromise, driving him to madness. Now that Cecil has finally found liberation, they first drove Barbara away. How could Cecil accept this? The two sides were at a stalemate when suddenly Amanda bent over, clutching her stomach in pain, and cried out, "Oh, it hurts so much." The next moment, her grip loosened, and the daughter in her arms was about to fall to the ground. Amanda. Mrs. Burgess changed her expression and saw Amanda's white dress gradually stained red with blood beneath it. "Quick, someone help." After a chaotic scramble, the Burgess family hurriedly sent the miscarrying Amanda to the hospital. Just as Amanda was wheeled into the operating room, the Clarence family rushed over in a panic. Mrs. Clarence started with a slap, the whooshing sound carrying a crisp echo through the empty hallway. "Cecil, is this how you take care of my daughter? If anything happens to her, I swear I won't let you off." With that slap, Cecil's head was knocked sideways, a trickle of blood seeping from the corner of his mouth. Yet Cecil remained like a soulless puppet, allowing Mrs. Clarence to point at Cecil's nose and scream insults. The sight pained Mrs. Burgess deeply. She hurried forward to hold Mrs. Clarence's hand, trying to calm her with soothing words. "In-laws, all the fault lies with my son. Rest assured, once Amanda comes out, I'll make sure Cecil takes good care of her. I won't let anything happen to Amanda again." Mrs. Clarence didn't believe a word of it and scoffed coldly. "Care for her? Your son is about to run off with someone else. How can he care for her? My daughter has endured so much for your son all these years, bore one child and is now pregnant with another, asking for nothing in return. And this is how your family treats her. If you can't take care of her properly, I'll bring my daughter and granddaughter back to the Clarence family. Our Clarence family can certainly afford to raise them." Mrs. Burgess panicked completely upon hearing this. She slapped Cecil on the back. "What are you standing there for? Apologize now." Cecil remained motionless, not even willing to spare a glance. Cecil did nothing wrong, yet they pinned all the blame on Cecil. Screams, pleas, and countless chaotic sounds all blended together, forming an invisible hand that tightened around Cecil, piece by piece, as the air grew increasingly thin. Just as Cecil was about to suffocate, a furious roar came from the distance. This is a hospital. Please keep quiet. The patient is about to come out. The invisible hand suddenly released Cecil, and the corridor fell silent once again. Soon, the operating room doors were opened from inside, and several nurses and doctors slowly wheeled out a mobile bed. On it lay Amanda, her eyes tightly shut, her face pale as a sheet, with a ventilator covering her mouth. Quickly, the crowd surrounding Cecil split into two groups. One group hurried over to Amanda's mobile bed, bending to hold the bed rails while checking her condition and assisting the nurses in transferring her to the ward. Meanwhile, they surrounded the doctor, carefully inquiring about Amanda's condition. The doctor's voice came through the thick mask, sounding even more muffled. The pregnant woman has just recovered from childbirth and is pregnant again. Her body is extremely weak. She must stay in bed for the first 3 months and avoid any further stress. If she loses this pregnancy, it will be difficult for her to conceive again in the future. Mrs. Burgess's heart wavered with the doctor's words, and as the last word fell, Mrs. Burgess's heart sank to the depths. Ignoring the cold sweat on her back, she hurriedly followed the doctor to the office. Doctor, what medicine should our daughter-in-law take? Mrs. Burgess's voice faded away along with her figure disappearing around the corner, leaving only Cecil alone in the empty hallway. Cecil sat in the wheelchair with downcast eyes, lost in thought, before quickly lifting his head and attempting to rise from the wheelchair to move outside. But the next moment, Mrs. Burgess's bodyguards forcibly stopped Cecil and said, "Young master, you should go see the young madam first. Get lost." Cecil remained motionless, only giving a cold stare to the person in front of him, telling them to get lost. The bodyguard was exceptionally dutiful, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Apologies, young master, but if you refuse to go, we'll have to escort you there ourselves. After all, she's carrying your child. Even if you don't care about the young madam, at least think of the child." Cecil was taken aback. Indeed, no matter how much he disliked Amanda, she still carried his child in her womb, a child that shared half of his bloodline. Soon, Cecil was ushered to the front of Amanda's hospital room. Just as the bodyguard was about to knock, the voices of Amanda and Mrs. Clarence came from inside first. "Mom, your plan to fake a miscarriage was brilliant. It really worked." Cecil stayed again. It was Amanda's voice, but laced with a kind of Cecil had never heard before. A viscous, calculating tone, each word like a needle dipped in ice. "What if I occasionally let the child have a little accident in the future? Cecil, would they eventually stay for good out of heartache for the child?" Those final words slithered like an icy serpent, abruptly burrowing into Cecil's ears and sinking venomous fangs into their nerves. Cecil instantly stiffened, blood surging to their head only to freeze solid the next second, draining all warmth from their limbs. A bone-deep chill crawled up from their feet, scaling their spine until it frosted Cecil's fingertips and shattered something Cecil had always believed in. Seeing this, the bodyguard quickly withdrew his hand and stepped aside to avoid any suspicion. Soon, the proud voice of Mrs. Clarence came from inside again. "Of course, just look at who your mother is. Since she's already gone, you can still use those methods on Cecil." Outside the door, Cecil felt his eyelids twitch violently upon hearing this. Don't go too far, though. After all, they're your children. Just let the older one have a fever and cry a bit. That's enough. Don't poison or drop the child. It's your own flesh and blood. As for the younger one, don't torment them too much either. Don't worry, Mom, I know my limits. But right now, I've already promised Cecil that I'd let him go once we have the wedding, even though I faked a miscarriage to keep Cecil here for now. What about later? Eventually, Cecil will go looking for Barbara. What will I do then? Don't worry, I've already talked to the Burgess family, and they've sent her far away. She won't come back, and Cecil won't leave either. Just focus on your pregnancy. Once this baby is born, the Burgess family will arrange for you two to get your marriage certificate. Cecil's eyes narrowed instantly, flashing with a dangerous glint, the veins on the back of his hand bulging as he gripped the wheelchair. So that's how it is. Cecil had always believed that the various problems their child faced over the past year were caused by Barbara, but it turned out they were all the doing of Amanda. the biological mother herself. The pale, gaunt faces worn down by the child's illnesses. The trembling moments when they curled up in Cecil's arms seeking comfort in the dead of night. The frenzied outbursts of beating Barbara for the child's sake. And those countless nights when Cecil repeatedly abandoned the one they loved, leaving Barbara to suffer punishment again and again, staying vigil by Amanda or the child's sickbed, holding her or the child's hand, listening to her sobs and the child's cries, their hearts shattered into dust over and over. Every moment, every breath choked with unbearable pain. It was all part of her and her mother's cold, calculated scheme. The world suddenly fell silent. The pungent smell of disinfectant in the hallway vanished. The distant murmurs from the nurse's station disappeared, leaving only the deafening roar of Cecil's own blood rushing in their ears, pounding so loudly it made their skull buzz. Their stomach churned violently, a sharp metallic taste surging up their throat, only to be swallowed back down by Cecil with a desperate force. "Cecil, what are you standing here for? Why aren't you going in?" When Mrs. Burgess walked over carrying a large pile of medicine, she saw her son frozen in front of Amanda's hospital room, not moving a muscle. Mrs. Burgess thought Cecil had come to his senses but didn't know how to face Amanda, so she decided to open the door for Cecil herself. But the next moment, Mrs. Clarence's regretful voice came from inside. "In this lifetime, I never expected your father to give Barbara a proper status. But you must strive to marry into that family. Otherwise your child will end up like you, just an illegitimate child, and one without any recognition at that." The next moment, Mrs. Burgess's face suddenly darkened, and her entire body began to tremble violently. Was it her old age playing tricks on her ears? What had she just heard? The future daughter-in-law she had longed for over the years, the one she had finally managed to secure, turned out to be an illegitimate child, and one without any recognition at that. A destructive rage, like a long-dormant volcano erupting suddenly, with scorching magma carrying the power to incinerate everything, instantly shattered Mrs. Burgess's last remaining barriers of reason. Back then, it was because she looked down on Barbara's status as an orphan that she had gone to great lengths to prevent Barbara and Cecil from being together. They, the Burgess family, are a century-old aristocratic clan, where every wife has been born into nobility. If their family suddenly married a woman born an orphan as the lady of the house, the entire Burgess family would become the laughingstock of their social circle. Moreover, after so many generations, the Burgess family's influence is not what it once was, and they urgently need a marriage alliance to stabilize their status. And Amanda is Mrs. Burgess's most favored choice for a daughter-in-law after meticulous selection. She was born into the equally prestigious Clarence family, which even now holds a higher status than their Burgess family. Moreover, she is beautiful, knows how to please people, and most importantly, Amanda lowered her status by having a child before marrying into their family. How could Mrs. Burgess not be satisfied and fond of her? Since Amanda came to the Burgess family, Mrs. Burgess has truly cherished her like a treasure, giving her whatever she wanted. But now, the person Mrs. Burgess has poured endless effort and affection into turns out to be the daughter of a mistress, and not even a recognized one at that. This is even worse than Barbara. No wonder Mrs. Burgess hasn't seen Mr. Clarence since that wedding a year ago. Mrs. Burgess could no longer hold back. She abruptly raised her hand, pushed the door open, rushed in, and with all her strength, fiercely slapped Amanda and Mrs. Clarence several times. "You vile woman, how dare you deceive me?" A sharp scream instantly echoed through the hospital room, followed by the sound of things being smashed. Cecil hurriedly pushed the wheelchair inside, only to find the room in complete disarray. Mrs. Burgess had carefully selected nutritional supplements for Amanda, but now they lay shattered across the floor. Glass fragments, like countless sharp ice crystals, were scattered everywhere, reflecting a cold, blinding light under the sunlight. The Mrs. Burgess had specially taken at the wedding banquet, capturing Cecil and Amanda in a kiss, was now violently smashed against the wall by Mrs. Burgess. In the photo, Amanda's smile was grotesquely split by a jagged shard of glass, instantly turning it fragmented and eerie. Mrs. Burgess was breathing rapidly, her chest heaving violently, her eyes bloodshot from extreme rage and agony. She still clutched Mrs. Clarence's hair tightly, dragging her mercilessly toward the exit. Beside her, Amanda was still weak from the anesthesia, her body devoid of strength, and she collapsed to the floor the moment she got out of bed. Meanwhile, Cecil in the wheelchair watched her coldly as she struggled to rise from the ground. Kneeling at Cecil's feet, her pale face streaked with tears, Cecil had seen Amanda in many states, but this was the first time witnessing her so terrified. "Cecil, please listen to me. I didn't mean to hurt the child. I only did it because I love you so much. Please, for the sake of the 2 children I've borne for you, don't send me away, okay?" Before today, Amanda had always felt her life was exceptionally smooth. Although she was Mr. Clarence's illegitimate child, she was still showered with affection. As she grew up, she won Mrs. Burgess's favor and fulfilled her wish of having children with the man she loved. Even though Cecil had a woman he loved, he gradually grew fond of her because she asked for neither status nor children. But now everything was ruined. Cecil knew. Mrs. Burgess knew. The entire Burgess family knew. Mr. Clarence had his own wife and daughter. Attending her wedding was already the last courtesy, and her only way forward now was to cling tightly to the Burgess family as her lifeline. She absolutely must not lose Cecil. "Child," Cecil finally spoke, but his voice was utterly cold. "In your eyes, the child is just a tool for you to gain my attention. What right do you have to mention her? Amanda, for the child's sake, I'll give you a check for 10 million. Don't ever appear before me again." Those 2 short sentences were like a knife, completely severing Amanda's last hope, and like a cold wind, extinguishing the light in her eyes. Watching Cecil about to turn the wheelchair away, Amanda summoned strength from somewhere and tried to rise to chase after Cecil. But the next moment, a sharp pain shot through her abdomen, freezing her in place as she looked down at her skirt in disbelief. Warm blood gushed out like a breached flood, pooling at her feet into a crimson lake. No. Another gloomy, rainy day. The damp air tightly enveloping the Burgess household, sealing even the atmosphere outside. The Burgess household was shrouded in a thick gloom on everyone's faces, their movements cautious, as if afraid to displease the master. After one blow following another, Mrs. Burgess was completely bedridden, while Mr. Burgess had to delegate authority to Cecil to temporarily take over the company's affairs in order to care for his wife. Cecil had to juggle searching for Barbara's whereabouts while managing the company's operations. In just a week, Cecil's face was already covered with exhaustion. Looking at the bowing bodyguard before him, Cecil pinched the bridge of his nose and asked, "Still no trace of her?" The bodyguard remained silent, only lowering his head further. After seeing through Amanda and Mrs. Clarence's true nature, Mrs. Clarence finally remembered Barbara's good qualities and agreed to let Cecil marry her. When he first heard Mrs. Burgess announce this decision, Cecil was filled with mixed emotions. Even if Mrs. Burgess hadn't said anything, Cecil would have done everything in his power to find Barbara and overcome all obstacles to be with her forever. Now that he had his parents' approval, Cecil felt the biggest obstacle in his heart had completely vanished, which was also a great relief for both Cecil and Barbara. So Cecil intensified his search efforts. But after a week, not only was there no sign of Barbara, but even her whereabouts remained unknown. Initially, although Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess had bought Barbara a ticket to Finland when they sent her away. However, when Cecil's men chased her to Finland, they were informed by the locals that Barbara had never arrived. Upon inquiring with the airline, they discovered Barbara had changed her flight mid-journey. They went to the destination Barbara had changed her flight to, only to be told again that Barbara had boarded a local train, and no one knew where she had gone. The trail had completely gone cold. If this was the first annoyance, then the second one was, knock, knock, knock. The office door was knocked, and the assistant entered after receiving permission. "President, she's here again and insists on staying until she sees you." Since the Burgess family and Amanda Mrs. Clarence had a complete falling out, Amanda miscarried, and Mrs. Clarence also fell ill. Their social standing plummeted, and Amanda could no longer care for Mrs. Clarence, let alone her own post-miscarriage body. As she insisted on seeking out Cecil, she pleaded with Cecil, asking him to consider their young daughter's need for a father and to continue their life together. Amanda also promised that she had realized her mistakes, would never harm the child again, and would live peacefully with Cecil. In a final attempt to soften Cecil's heart, Amanda even brought their daughter to his company, kneeling in the lobby while ignoring the child's hungry cries. Because of the child's presence, the bodyguards couldn't easily drive them away and had to ask the assistant to inquire with Cecil. Cecil initially harbored some paternal affection for this child, But the thought that the child also carried Amanda's blood. What if they grew up to be as malicious as Amanda? Cecil's pity for the child vanished in an instant. Cecil remained silent, simply scrolling through his phone to check messages related to Barbara. After waiting for a long time without receiving a response from Cecil, the assistant was about to take matters into their own hands and leave to handle it themselves when Cecil finally spoke. "If you ever dare to disturb me with such matters again, you can pack your bags and leave with her." The assistant stiffened, quickly nodding in agreement before hurriedly walking away with slightly panicked steps. In the lobby on the first floor, Amanda knelt motionless in the center, holding her daughter tightly. Her face was deathly pale, her body swaying unsteadily, and the cries of her daughter in her arms grew weaker from prolonged hunger. Yet Amanda seemed not to hear, her eyes fixed unwaveringly on the CEO's private elevator in front of her. Finally, the elevator began to move. With a ding, the exclusive executive elevator descended from the top floor to the ground level, its doors slowly opening as a figure stepped out. Instantly, Amanda's previously vacant and lifeless eyes suddenly lit up. Ignoring the pain in her knees from kneeling, she hastily stood and hurried toward the figure. "Cecil." A voice filled with eager excitement escaped her lips as she cautiously reached out toward the person. Yet, in the next moment, her hand froze mid-air, and her smile stiffened on her face. "Why is it you? Where's Cecil?" Amanda anxiously looked behind the assistant, but couldn't see the familiar face she was searching for. The assistant looked at her expressionlessly. "Miss Amanda, the CEO has already made everything clear to you long ago. Since you're so keen on mistreating the child, then you don't need to raise this child anymore." These were the exact words Cecil said to Cecil as the assistant was leaving. Amanda, her expression changed, and she instinctively tightened her grip on the child in her arms. "What do you mean?" The next moment, the sound of high heels clicking against the floor came from Amanda behind. She turned around and saw her half-sister approaching. Before she could react, the woman snatched the child from her arms. "Since you can't take care of this child properly, I'll take over from now on. It just so happens I can't get pregnant. Don't worry. From now on, she'll be my own daughter." "No, don't." Amanda's face turned panicked. She frantically tried to snatch her child back, only to be knocked unconscious by a karate chop from one of her sister's bodyguards and dragged away along with the child. "Please inform your CEO that the person has been taken away. She won't be coming back in the future. And congratulations to Mr. Cecil on securing the land in the Northern District." Trading a piece of land for a child was an extremely profitable deal for both parties. This could be considered Cecil's final act of mercy toward the child. News within the circle can either be tightly sealed or spread rapidly. Within just a few days, Barbara, who was hiding in a small mountain village teaching, saw the follow-up about Cecil and Amanda on her phone news. After reading it, she was filled with sighs. After all, in her impression, Cecil might not love Amanda, but for the sake of their two children, Cecil had always been Amanda quite attentive. Yet not long after she left, things between them had come to such an end. But this had nothing to do with Barbara anymore, as she now had her own matters to attend to. She pushed open the wooden window, watered the few potted plants outside, and then set down the watering can before settling back into the recliner to gaze at the school nestled among the surrounding mountains. It was summer vacation, and the small school was only guarded by a few teachers, with Barbara being one of them. The afternoon sun made people drowsy, reminding her of the past. Back then, Mr. Burgess and Mrs. Burgess gave her a plane ticket, a new phone, and $1 million check before sending her to the airport. She didn't say anything and simply walked through security. But just to be safe, Barbara secretly changed her flight. When she arrived at the new destination and was about to board a train, she suddenly saw an article about her alma mater hiring teachers. She immediately called back and only then learned that because the school was too poor and remote, many teachers were unwilling to come and teach the children. Hearing the helpless tone of the principal on the other end of the line, Barbara felt her heart ache with sympathy. She had been orphaned since childhood and could be said to have grown up under the principal's care. In recent years, she had neglected her hometown and the principal due to Cecil's affairs, and she immediately decided to return to her home country and hometown to become a teacher. Thus, by a twist of fate, she perfectly missed Cecil's people who came looking for her. Moreover, she had never mentioned her past to Cecil. Cecil knew nothing about her except that she was an orphan, so returning to her hometown was Barbara's best choice, ensuring no one could find her. Thanks to Barbara's $1 million donation, The school was completely rebuilt and many new teachers were hired. That evening, the new teachers invited Barbara to go up the mountain to pick mushrooms and dig for bamboo shoots, planning to have a wild vegetable hot pot for dinner. On the way up the mountain, a teacher close to Barbara named Alice linked arms with her and chattered about recent happenings at the school. I heard the principal recently secured another investment from someone with the surname Burgess. I think they're sending people to inspect your school next week. Barbara, will you be going then? Back when Barbara gave the principal that $1 million, he used half to renovate the school and hire teachers, and the other half for village development, for the sake of sustainable development in the future. The principal embarked on the path of seeking investments, persuading kind-hearted individuals everywhere to contribute their goodwill. However, this path was not so straightforward. 3 months passed, and the principal had only managed to find 2 donors, one of whom was the Burgess family. To ensure a smooth inspection by the other party, the principal selected teachers who are meticulous and articulate to accompany them during the visit. While Barbara was undoubtedly the principal's first choice, to Alice's surprise, Barbara politely declined. I won't be attending then. I have other commitments. Oh, Alice said with regret. I heard the CEO of the Burgess family is handsome and wealthy, and you're so outstanding. If Cecil comes, what if? Barbara knew Alice meant well, so she wasn't angry. Alice came from a small town and was solely focused on her studies, unaware of the situation between her and Cecil. Besides, she had just managed to move on from the past and really didn't want to go through another fruitless romance. So Barbara smiled and patted Alice on the arm. I'm not considering marriage or anything like that. I just want to teach these children well and help them leave the mountains someday. When it comes to children, Alice shifted the topic back to the child again. After finishing the hot pot, everyone cleaned up and dispersed. Just as Barbara was about to return to her room, the principal called out to her from behind. Barbara, I have something to tell you. A moment later, Barbara was sitting on a bench in the corner of the playground, arm in arm with the principal. Barbara, are you really not going that day? The principal's voice carried regret. She had watched Barbara grow up with her own hands and knew how much sweat and tears she had shed to leave the mountains behind. Now that she had finally stepped out of the mountains, she had returned for this school and even moved her household registration back. If she wanted to leave again, it would be much harder. So when she learned that the Burgess family was sending someone to inspect the school, the principal was thrilled. Even when selecting teachers to accompany the visitors on the tour, her first thought was Barbara. Barbara is so outstanding that if she gets praised by the inspectors after going there, she might even catch the attention of higher-ups. Later, she could be transferred to other better schools and even have her household registration moved out again. She is still so young. She shouldn't waste her youth in this small mountain village. The principal's kindness Barbara appreciates, but she won't leave. She still refused the principal with those words, saying her heart only wants to stay here, and since this is where she grew up, she wouldn't look down on this place either. Moreover, I don't want to see him again. This is Barbara's fundamental reason for refusing to go. She doesn't want to see the person who repeatedly deceived and hurt her for Amanda's sake. Not meeting again was the final outcome between them. The principal sighed deeply, his eyes filled with regret. But in the end, he chose to respect her decision. Just as the principal was about to leave, Barbara suddenly called out to him, Principal, please help cover for me when the time comes. If Cecil really comes in person or if we actually meet her, it will be troublesome. The principal didn't turn back, just waved his hand. Don't worry, I know what to do. A few days later, the Burgess family's convoy appeared on the winding mountain road. But before they entered the mountains, Barbara and Alice had already taken a car to a small town in the neighboring mountains to purchase necessities. In the back seat of one of the distant convoy vehicles, Cecil gazed at the winding, endless mountains with a complex mix of emotions in his eyes. Is this where Barbara used to live? A few days earlier, Cecil was on the phone instructing his team to intensify the search for Barbara's whereabouts when his assistant knocked and handed him Cecil the current quarter's Burgess Family Charity Foundation funding evaluation projects. Among the numerous projects, Cecil immediately noticed this school nestled deep in the mountains. The Burgess family primarily funds environmental protection and healthcare for the impoverished, rarely donating to schools. After all, this field already has plenty of benefactors, and it wouldn't make much difference with or without the Burgess family's contribution. It would be better to use that money for other charitable causes in greater need. Just as Cecil was about to scrap the project, He suddenly thought of something and asked his assistant Barbara for her hometown address. The assistant hesitated at first, mentioning an orphanage where Barbara had briefly stayed in the past. Seeing that Cecil remained silent, she quickly corrected herself and named the school Barbara had attended as a child, the very one listed in the project proposal. Cecil immediately set aside everything else and instructed his assistant to contact the school's principal to arrange an inspection and discuss the specifics of the investment in detail. As for Cecil, the reason he did this was to inquire from the principal about Barbara's whereabouts. Before, Cecil had always thought Barbara was just an orphan with no relatives or close friends, so he never considered searching for her through those connections. Now, Cecil knew Barbara had people close to her, and perhaps they might know her whereabouts. After all, she was someone who valued relationships deeply. It was unlikely she wouldn't stay in touch with them. A week later, Cecil and his convoy arrived here. After several hours of bumpy travel, Cecil and his group finally arrived at the school where Barbara had once stayed. Cecil bent down to step out of the car, looking up at the recently renovated school before him. Even though the school had undergone significant changes, the underlying dilapidation beneath its new facade was still visible, and Barbara had endured such harsh conditions for over a decade. In an instant, Cecil's eyes welled up with a hint of heartache. The entire inspection and negotiation went smoothly. The Burgess family group immediately decided to provide an annual sponsorship of $1 million to the school starting next month, with the requirement that all students must complete their education up to university level, whether it be undergraduate or associate degree. If for 3 consecutive years there are students who drop out for reasons other than health, the Burgess family will immediately cease all funding. The contract was signed smoothly, and the principal and accompanying teachers warmly invited them to dine at the school's newly built cafeteria. Along the way, Cecil seemed hesitant to speak, but in the end, it was the principal who broached the topic first. "Mr. Cecil, you came to ask me about Barbara, didn't you?" Cecil's eyes instantly brightened. Before Cecil could speak, the principal continued. "Barbara mentioned you to me. I know where she is, but she won't see you." Cecil's fingers convulsively tightened, his nails digging deep into the fragile skin of his palms, bringing sharp pain that couldn't begin to offset the heart-wrenching agony tearing through his chest. The exact same words as Mrs. Burgess had said back then. Why wouldn't she see him, when she loved him so much? The principal seemed to sense Cecil's unspoken question, his gaze drifting toward the distant mountain peaks piercing the clouds as memories of the past surfaced. "Barbara lost her parents at a young age, so I took her in to care for her. I was often overwhelmed with school matters, but Barbara was so well behaved, never causing trouble, even helping me out in her own way." The principal's voice seemed to echo from afar, and Cecil gradually envisioned a small figure trailing dutifully behind the principal, doing whatever she could to assist. It was precisely in such an environment that Barbara developed an indomitable character. Nothing could break her, nothing could drive her away, unless she became utterly disappointed in something and chose to leave on her own. And you must have done something to warrant that. Although Barbara didn't elaborate on the details of their relationship to the principal could roughly guess some of it. The principal turned to look at Cecil, gazing at him with eyes weathered yet resolute. Peering into Cecil's deepest soul, Cecil saw his own reflection clearly in the principal's eyes, his current state of agony and remorse. Yet unable to utter a single word, Cecil's throat felt as if blocked by stones, and with all his strength, he could only manage to produce a single syllable. So this is why she won't look back. Mr. Cecil, matters of the heart can't be forced, or both people will end up getting hurt. Having said that, the headmaster stopped looking at Cecil and walked away alone into the distance, leaving only Cecil standing there desolately, like a silent statue. It wasn't until late at night that Barbara returned with the other teachers. She had thought that no matter how long the inspection took, the people from the Burgess family would leave the same day. But when she got out of the van, she immediately spotted Cecil's Maybach. She was all too familiar with this car. Cecil had driven her around every street and alley in northern Beijing in this car, had prepared all sorts of surprises for her in it, and had even made passionate love to her in this very vehicle. But later, the same car Cecil used to do everything with another woman that he had done with her. Barbara was about to turn her gaze away and continue walking into the school when the driver of the Maybach opened the door and stepped out. Without any warning, or even the slightest anticipation, two people who thought they would never meet again suddenly came face to face. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. The earthy scent of rain-soaked soil vanished, The distant muffled voices of children playing on the field faded away, leaving only Cecil's frantic heartbeat and ragged breathing echoing in his chest. Barbara. Cecil never expected to see Barbara here, because the mountain road was rugged and it was dark. Cecil and Cecil's group decided to stay at the school for the night and leave early the next morning. With a pile of company matters still to handle, Cecil went straight back to the car. Just as Cecil was about to step out of the car to smoke a cigarette and relax, he caught sight of Barbara, whom he had been longing to see for so long. Just 3 months apart, the woman before him had changed dramatically. Her once waist-length hair had been cut into a neat shoulder-length bob, and the white dress had been replaced by a faded shirt and jeans. The smooth, fair skin that Cecil had painstakingly nurtured now appeared rough. Cecil almost thought he had mistaken her for someone else. Barbara also looked at Cecil, never expecting to see Cecil here. The moment she saw Cecil, the buried grief surged back into her throat, coiling like a python around her windpipe. Snow-like static flickered at the edges of her vision as memories rewound, replaying every painful moment in her mind. Much later, the wind carried Barbara's voice into Cecil's ears, sinking deep into Cecil's heart. Cecil, why did you come looking for me? Without sorrow, without agitation, even in a very flat tone. It felt like the sharpest knife being plunged into Cecil's chest. The pain sank into his stomach, triggering a chain of spasms. The entire world spun before Cecil, forcing him to stagger backward a few steps. His back slammed heavily against the cold car door, emitting a dull thud. The pain spread along his spine, yet strangely failed to rouse his numb senses. Why did you come looking for Barbara? Because Cecil wanted an explanation. Why did you suddenly abandon him? Why leave without a word? Why forbid Cecil from finding her? The most important thing is whether she still loves Cecil or not. But those words stuck in her throat and she couldn't bring herself to say them. After a long silence, Cecil finally said, I want to take you home. Cecil told how he had discovered Amanda's true nature and how he had dealt with her and the child. Cecil speaks of his and his parents' regrets. Cecil recounts the madness and breakdown he experienced while searching for her over these past months. Barbara clutches her phone tightly, struggling to suppress the trembling throughout her body. Not from relief, not from sorrow, but from the belated truth suddenly tearing open a scabbed wound, exposing the festering flesh beneath that had never healed. It's too late. Everything is far too late. She had long passed the time when she needed the truth to be exposed. Nor did she need Cecil's attempts to win her back or his remorse. Cecil, I can't possibly go back with you, and we can't return to how things were. You weren't wrong to compromise and bow to your parents' wishes, nor were you wrong to have a child with Amanda. Your mistake was building a new family with another woman while giving me empty promises, making me waste year after year of my youth by your side. Back then, whenever I saw you being intimate with her, I always wondered if I was the other woman. No, Barbara, you're not the other woman. You're the one I love most. Cecil repeatedly denied it, instinctively reaching for her hand, only for her to sidestep and avoid his touch. But the truth is, you've had a child with her and gotten married. Except for the legal registration, you've done everything a married couple would do. Everyone would only see you and her as the real couple. So why did you come looking for me? There was already an immense chasm between them, one that no one could cross, and she no longer wished to try. Go back. Cecil, this isn't where you belong. As thunder rumbled in the distance, Barbara had no desire to engage further with Cecil and raised her hand, preparing to head back to her dorm. The very second she returned to her dorm, a downpour began outside. Yet that figure remained motionless, standing in the same spot. Barbara frowned slightly and was about to draw the curtains when the next moment, the room door was pounded loudly by someone outside. Mr. J. Come out quickly. Something happened to a student. The next moment Barbara flung the door open. What did you say? Recently, the mountainous area has been experiencing continuous rain, and several slopes are at risk of mudslides. Most of the villagers are elderly people and left behind children. For everyone's safety, the entire village was evacuated under the organization of the village party secretary, and all the school students were moved to live on campus. Yet, under such circumstances, a student suddenly ran out for some unknown reason. The principal was so anxious that he nearly fainted. He immediately reported the incident and, together with the rescue team dispatched from above, conducted a thorough search throughout the mountain village. All the school teachers, except for a few who stayed to take care of the other students, were sent out to look for the missing student. Barbara felt equally anxious upon hearing this and decided to go directly to the student's home with the teacher to search. At that moment, a faint rumbling sound could be heard from the distant valley. Barbara and the teacher exchanged glances, both filled with fear. "It's bad. A mudslide is coming." The two quickened their pace, braving the heavy rain as they ran toward the student's home. Sure enough, they found the trembling child hiding under the bed at home. Without stopping to ask why he had run back, they immediately picked him up to flee. But the child struggled violently. "No, I won't go. Mom is still here." Barbara looked at the child's arms and noticed he was clutching a pile of toys, with more scattered at his feet. Suddenly, she remembered that the child's mother had passed away early, and these toys were the last mementos his mother had left him. Barbara made a decision on the spot. She instructed the male teacher to carry the child and leave first, assuring them she would follow shortly. She also promised the child that she would bring all the toys back to school for him. After the male teacher carried the child away, Barbara quickly grabbed a sack and stuffed all the toys inside. Just as she hoisted the sack to leave, a mudslide suddenly shattered the window. Time froze abruptly, and a rigid terror seized Barbara. Her vision was filled only with the turbid, viscous sludge, carrying broken wood and debris. It roared as it surged over the windowsill, like the gaping maw of hell. The stench of damp earth instantly flooded her nostrils, suffocating Barbara's every breath. The mind went blank, the body as if drained of all bones, collapsing limply there, watching helplessly as the tidal wave of death surged forward. At that very moment, a figure burst through the churning mud, cleaving through the chaos of destruction, rushing toward her. Barbara instantly widened her eyes. "Cecil, how did he get here?" Barbara watched helplessly as Cecil abruptly halted, turned around, and with piercing eyes, instantly locked onto Barbara in the corner. Without uttering a single unnecessary word, he suddenly bent down, his shoulder slamming into Barbara's abdomen with such force that it lifted Barbara off her feet. In the dizzying whirl, she was hoisted onto Cecil's shoulder like a piece of luggage he refused to abandon. Cecil's body erupted with astonishing strength as he carried Barbara and charged toward the only possible escape, the wooden door leading to the neighboring hillside, colliding with it with tremendous force. And to prevent the poultry from escaping, the family had specifically added a wooden latch behind the door, firmly securing it to the wall. The escape route was thus brutally cut off, and disaster was gradually closing in on them. At that moment, a dull, grating tearing sound, as brief as an illusion, was followed by Cecil's body convulsing violently. A muffled groan, suppressed to the extreme, forced its way through Cecil's clenched teeth. Barbara froze in terror, her heart seizing as she looked down. Just as the wooden door was smashed open, a protruding wooden splinter, like a cold finger from hell, plunged deep into Cecil's right side. "Cecil!" Instinctively, Barbara's hands fumbled toward the wound. The scorching, sticky liquid coated her hands, and no matter how she tried to cover it, she couldn't stop the blood gushing from his injury. Yet Cecil seemed impervious to pain, continuing to ram against the wooden door while comforting her. With a faint cracking sound, a cold, rain-scented wind suddenly rushed in. The wind cut like a knife against their faces, yet carried a precious sting akin to the relief of survival. Barbara even caught a glimpse of the leaden sky's edge, that oppressive gray now glaringly bright. The door opened. Cecil gritted his teeth and struggled to keep carrying Barbara as he ran toward the hillside, the mudslide gradually receding from her view. They were safe. Barbara had just thought this when suddenly her vision spun wildly. The Cecil carrying her could hold on no longer and collapsed to the ground, yet still managed to shield her safely in front of him. "Cecil!" The sharp roar of a helicopter echoed in the distance. "Help!" Barbara took off her coat and waved it vigorously, swinging her arms toward the distant search and rescue helicopter. Soon, Cecil and Barbara were airlifted by helicopter to the nearest hospital. As soon as they landed, medical staff lifted Cecil onto a gurney and rushed him toward the operating room, closing the door, signing, pressing fingerprints. Barbara felt dizzy and lightheaded. After completing these procedures under the doctor's guidance, she could no longer hold on. Her vision darkened, and she collapsed to the floor. "Hey, someone come quick. Someone's fainted here." Barbara woke up again a day later. From the nurse, she learned that Cecil had undergone successful surgery and was now in the ward, but due to excessive blood loss, when he will wake up is unknown. He might wake up tomorrow, or he might never wake up again. Hearing this, Barbara's heart sank. After all, he had saved her, and it was only right for her to visit him. the moment she pushed open the hospital room door. The pungent smell of disinfectant rushed into Barbara's nostrils. She stood silently for a long moment before continuing inside, finally sitting by Cecil's hospital bed. When she had just woken up, the male teacher who had helped rescue the student came with the student to apologize to her. The mudslide came too suddenly, and his grandparents had poor memories, forgetting to bring his toys along. When he found out, he panicked and secretly ran out of school, never expecting that he would nearly cost 2 lives in the end. Eventually, he was severely scolded by his grandparents. The male teacher also told her that because of this incident, the principal had strengthened safety education and made the student read a self-criticism in front of the entire school as a lesson, to make him remember that in the face of disaster, human life is the most important. Barbara didn't say anything, just returned the snatched toy to the student. After telling him not to do such dangerous things again, she had the male teacher take him back. This matter can be considered satisfactorily concluded, except that the Cecil before us hasn't woken up yet. Barbara looked at his sleeping face, momentarily unable to articulate what she was feeling. Before leaving, the male teacher told her that he had encountered Cecil while carrying a student back to school. Cecil had heard about their search for someone and immediately rushed over, but unfamiliar with the mountain village, he took many wrong turns before finally finding them. By then, he was already drenched, with multiple injuries from falls. Yet his only thought was to find her as quickly as possible. At the end, the male teacher couldn't help but sigh, saying he didn't know what her relationship with Cecil really was, but he could see that Cecil loved her deeply. Thinking of this, Barbara smirked self-deprecatingly. There's no denying that Cecil truly loved her, both in the past and during this mudslide, but that didn't stop him from sleeping with other women, having children, getting married, and then lying to her, asking her to wait for him a little longer. Barbara truly couldn't wait any longer, which is why she resolutely left him. Even now, she still feels she left too late. She should have Cecil compromised and slept with Amanda, rather than softening her heart when he knelt on the ground crying, slapping himself while begging her to stay. In the end, it only caused her to suffer so much. Fortunately, she eventually left and gradually moved on from this painful experience. But now, Cecil has come looking for her again. He said he was wrong and regretted it. He claimed he had already dealt with Amanda and the child. He said he wanted to win her back. But Cecil had never considered one thing. Amanda might have been sent abroad by the Clarence family to fend for herself. But their daughter was still here. They would inevitably meet again. What if he softened his heart then? Moreover, Barbara would recall the past whenever she thought of their daughter. It was like money thrown into a trash heap. Disgusting whether picked up or not. It's also quite disgusting. Barbara is afraid of dirt and finds it repulsive. So no matter how much money it is, she wouldn't pick it up. Even if Cecil were to suffer more severe injuries for her, she wouldn't look back. Cecil was in a coma for 3 days when Mrs. Burgess, upon hearing of his accident, hurriedly rushed to the mountain village. Seeing Mrs. Burgess again after 3 months, the once meticulously dressed and always haughty Mrs. Burgess now looked weathered, with exhaustion evident at the corners of her eyes. Her tone had softened considerably when speaking. For the first time, she even lowered her head to apologize to Barbara, saying she had been blind and misjudged her, admitting that she and Mr. Burgess had wronged her. Perhaps it was retribution. Now the Burgess family had faced several financial crises, and their son had ended up in such a state. By the end, Mrs. Burgess even wiped away tears from the corners of her eyes. She said she didn't ask for Barbara to forgive herself and Mr. Burgess, only hoping she would no longer resent Cecil. After all, reaching this outcome was entirely due to her and Mr. Burgess. Barbara listened quietly to Mrs. Burgess as she poured out her grievances, saying nothing. It wasn't until Mrs. Burgess finished speaking and looked at her with hopeful eyes that Barbara finally spoke. I will never forgive you for what happened in the past, but I won't hold on to the hatred either. I still have my own life to live, and I don't want to waste any more time on such matters. Mrs. Burgess fell silent for a long time after hearing her words, then let out a deep sigh before taking a diary out of her bag. Barbara recognized the diary at first glance. This was the first gift Cecil received from her when they first got together, bought with the money she earned from part-time work. Back then, Cecil was especially moved. He said he would cherish the diary and record every bit of their life together, to show their children in the future, so their children would know how deeply their parents loved each other. After you left, Cecil went a bit mad. He would write in this diary every day, What exactly? I don't know. But the day he came looking for you, he said he'd show you the diary once he brought you back. Now that he's, well, I took the liberty of bringing it to you. If you can, just take a look. With that, Mrs. Burgess stood up first and walked into Cecil's hospital room. Only Barbara remained seated in the chair, staring at the diary in her lap. After an unknown amount of time, she finally raised her hand and slowly opened the diary with yellowed edges. May 1st, 2020. This is the first day Barbara and I officially became a couple. This diary is also the first gift she gave me. I'm very happy and excited. I will cherish this diary and love her wholeheartedly, never letting her down. For the next 3 years, Cecil kept his word. Throughout those 3 years, every page of this diary was filled with his deep love for her, from a single rose to the fireworks that light up the sky. Yet this love came to an abrupt end on the day they eloped. On September 11th, 2023, I knew my parents strongly opposed our relationship, but I never imagined they would go as far as threatening suicide. Perhaps aware of my predicament, Barbara took the initiative to break up with me, but I couldn't accept it. I couldn't let go of these 3 years of love. If she really left, I would lose my mind. So that was the day he took her and ran away. But in the end, they still failed. The diary remained blank for several more pages after that. Then came entries without dates, filled with pain, struggle, resentment, and anger. Barbara knew that during this time, Cecil's parents were pressuring him to sleep with Amanda and have a child. Barbara flipped a few more pages and found a line of large characters piercing through 2 whole pages. What his child. She knew that was the day he bowed his head to his parents and compromised. From then on, her nightmare began. For a full year and a half, the diary remained completely blank, until that day Cecil came to the small mountain village to find her. His handwriting finally reappeared in the diary, a response to her farewell letter. Barbara, I'm sorry. I know you've suffered a lot over the years, yet I always asked you to endure a little longer. At first, I thought of quickly taking care of her, sleeping with her, and having her bear a child so we could be free. But after the child was born, my heart began to change. After all, it was my first child. The thought of her never having seen me, her father, made me soften. I agreed to stay with the child a little longer. Later, my parents felt a daughter wasn't enough and wanted me to have a son with her. She pretended to want to help me, dragging me to bed right after childbirth. My heart softened again. A woman who asked for no status, disregarding her own health for me to this extent. So I felt guilty and thought to treat her better these days. But in the end, my softness became a sharp blade against you, which is why you left so resolutely. I often wonder, if I hadn't compromised that day, would we have had a different ending? We would have married, had children, a house full of grandchildren, gone wherever you wanted. Not like this, but I know it's all too late now. All I can do is try to make it up to you, in case one day your heart softens. The hour hand of the wall clock ticked around once. Barbara finally closed the diary in her hands. Just then, Mrs. Burgess and a group of people wheeled out Cecil's hospital bed. This time Mrs. Burgess came specifically to take him back to City A for treatment, as the medical conditions there are better, increasing the likelihood of him waking up. And today might very well be her last meeting with Cecil. Barbara handed the diary back to Mrs. Burgess and said, "Auntie, if one day he wakes up, please pass on a message for me. Let everything in the past be bygones. From now on, we'll be like 2 parallel lines that never meet. We should never see each other again." After saying this, she no longer looked at Mrs. Burgess, nor at the unconscious Cecil on the moving bed. Her footsteps were resolute as she walked away in the opposite direction from them, to live her completely new life. Cecil, this is where we part ways, never to meet again.